This is a masterpiece, with crunchy combat against imaginative boss monsters, crushing Dark Souls-esque difficulty spikes, a deep well of lore that would launch several YouTube careers, and most important of all, an elegantly designed, interconnected world that is just a joy to get lost in.
I think Hollow Knight is going to be the first game on Girlfriend Reviews where I have nothing to complain about.
Hollow Knight is such an outrageous bargain at its $15 launch price that it's pretty much flawless. It's immune to criticism.
Simply put, you've got one of the finest examples of a Metroidvania-style game ever made.
With such a high density of secrets to find and fun, challenging enemies to face, it's worth spending every moment you can in Hollow Knight.
Hollow Knight launched in 2017 off the back of a successful Kickstarter campaign that led its 3-person team to great success. It's one of the most widely praised indie titles out there, with 1 million YouTubers, reviewers and commenters online praising it as one of the greatest Metroidvanias ever made. And I had never played it. It's been sitting in my Steam library for 1 million years at this point, as a hand-animated Metroidvania sounds exactly like my kind of game. But I just never got round to playing it until early this year, when I finally booted it up for the first time to finally see what all the fuss is about. And so, today, I'll be offering my thoughts now that I've finally played Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight is gorgeous. It's the first thing that hits you. The character designs are really cute and stylish, the backgrounds are lush and detailed, and the animation is superb. It's a solid start, and naturally this was a big part of why I wanted to play it. After all, you may have noticed I quite often have a fondness for games with striking visuals and strong animation, and Hollow Knight absolutely delivers. On top of that, the sound design in the game is excellent too. As you progress through Hallownest, you get to hear all manner of noises that clue you into what's going on around you. Little shuffles and footsteps, mumbles and noises, and that's excellent. There's also the little gibberish language that NPCs speak in when you encounter them, and more often than not, their voices just add to the cute designs. And then, all that culminates in... Oh my god, I love them! I need these cuties for real as pets, please! Yes, anyway, let's get back to this. The gameplay is also fairly solid. The combat is tricky yet fair, and it will kick your ass, but you will also improve with each attempt at fighting the hard-as-nails bosses. So, I had quite a few problems with Hollow Knight. So, that combat, it is tricky but fair. This is an opinion I will hold in regards to the actual mechanics of combat. But what happens when you fail drove me up the wall every single time. Every time you die, you're kicked back to the last bench you visited. Every single one of those benches is set miles away from every boss fight. And as someone who often needed a few tries before I got good at a section, the slow trudge back to the fight every single time was something that I very quickly got tired of. It's not exactly new to the Metroidvania genre, and as a game that takes a lot of inspiration from Dark Souls as well, it's not that odd for the game to kick you back to a previous checkpoint rather than placing them by each fight. But for me, something about the distance you'd always have to trek to get back to where you were just became a chore. Particularly if the route there had tough enemies to take out again, which it often did. It discouraged me from wanting to try again, and more often than not, I would think, you know what, I don't feel like walking back that way again, let's explore somewhere else for a bit to cool off, and come back later. But wait, the game doesn't let me do that because of the shade system. Every time you die, you leave a spirit behind that you have to defeat to get your money and part of your soul meter back, which often left me feeling like I was stuck in a loop. I get what they were doing here, I'm not here to argue their artistic intent with this mechanic, but for me it was a mechanic that made dying even more frustrating than it already was. And sometimes the shade would be placed right in the boss arena, adding an extra thing to worry about in an already tough boss fight. The soul meter part of this mechanic was especially annoying to me, because it limited my abilities each time, which leads me to another problem I had with Hollow Knight. its pacing. Metroidvanias always start slow. This is not an issue I have, but usually you manage to nab a couple of abilities within the first couple of hours that drastically change how you play, and it helps build up the game as you go. In Hollow Knight, the first ability I received was when I was roughly 3 hours into the game. Right before this point, I was starting to get very antsy about when this supposed Metroidvania would start giving me new abilities instead of endlessly teasing me with places to use them. Hollow Knight is slow, but for me, it was too slow. Unlocking new abilities seemed to take an age, and even when I did unlock abilities, they felt too limited in their use. Every ability I unlock in other similar games feels like a game changer, making me stronger or allowing me to move in a more efficient way. In Hollow Knight, the first ability was a neat little dash move, but it only really gave me the ability to move between two platforms that were slightly harder to just jump to. Compare this to something like Ori, where each ability makes Ori's movements more fluid. So by the end of the game, you're bouncing off everything and flinging yourself through the air in a way that feels super satisfying. In Hollow Knight, I never got that sense of satisfaction. I hear that you can get those kinds of abilities, but I was about 7 hours deep by the time I stopped and I barely felt like I'd gained anything. This was exacerbated by how little I enjoyed exploration in Hollow Knight 2. While a lot of the environments were gorgeous, they were often very samey too, and the map system really didn't help. While I appreciated the push to make the player navigate largely by themselves until they encountered a bench or the map maker, the amount of areas that were maze-like and had little variational landmarks to guide me left me feeling unwilling to venture into new places at times. I'm looking directly at you, Fungal Wastes. You were especially bad for this. It also just didn't help for me that I didn't feel immersed in the world. It's a game where the story is fed to you piecemeal, and while I don't object to that, there was little that I felt I could latch onto story-wise. I spent much of my playtime wondering, why am I even here? The snippets of story and world building often felt a little too vague for my liking, and this is coming from a guy who does love a good mystery. What this left me with was a Metroidvania with frustrating combat, movement that felt like a slog, and a world I was reluctant to explore more often than not. None of the key elements of the genre offered by Hollow Knight clicked with me, and eventually I just gave up on it after almost 8 hours of playtime, accepting the fact that I simply was not enjoying myself. For me, no. Even in the early stages of the game when I was still feeling good about it, I wasn't quite getting the hype. There's a lot that I recognise as good about the game, but even then, nothing jumped out at me as the stunning, amazing, earth-shatteringly wonderful game the internet and press had made it out to be. It felt like a perfectly serviceable Metroidvania, but nothing that seemed especially standout. I'm aware that this is an unpopular opinion. Hell, the whole reason I was inspired to start this series was because of just how beloved this game is. I wanted to love it. On paper, it ticked all the boxes for me. Bear in mind that Ori and the Will of the Wisps was my favourite game of last year, another Metroidvania style game about delving into a decaying world with a gorgeous art style, and yet Hollow Knight never won me over. I found myself more irritated by Hollow Knight than anything else. The combination of tough combat with its slow, even occasionally tedious pacing, meant I spent much of my time with it miserable, and it's disappointing for me to say this. I love the art of Hollow Knight, and I recognise the great achievement Team Cherry have made here, but it's not for me. And after all the hype, that's a shame. So I finally played Hollow Knight, and I was sadly disappointed. Thanks for watching everyone, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and make sure to click subscribe if you're not already. This video was supported by my patrons, who you can see on screen, and you can join them through the link in the description. That's all for now, but I will see you again very soon.